Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm chatting with Stefan Spears from Inventus Mining. In this interview, we discuss the current run in the gold price. We also get into what it's going to take in order to start to see some capital flow into some of the exploration names. And we get into Stefan's name, Inventus Mining, where he tells us what the plan is for this early stage gold explorer. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Stefan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Steve, it's great to be with you.
So the price of gold has been on a tear recently. For the most part, mainstream media hasn't really talked too much about it. What do you get the sense is driving the price of gold right now?
Well, mainstream media doesn't like generally talking about gold. They have to do it under duress. And what's driving gold? I mean, I think really inflation is driving gold. I mean, the value of currency is going down, and people are looking for other assets. You see that people are buying Bitcoin, they're buying gold. Real estate is still really hot. People are buying physical assets wherever they can with their cash.
We were talking about this pre-interview a little bit, and it's interesting to me what it's going to take to get people excited about investing in exploration stage gold companies in Canada right now. Although we've seen the price of gold do pretty well here over the last year, and really, if you want to back it up all the way to pre-COVID, we're now talking less than 5 years, and the price is up materially since then. And we still haven't really seen a whole lot of interest in the gold juniors. What do you think needs to happen in order for us to see more interest in exploration companies?
Well, I think a number of things. I think one, there's a whole lot of investors that were kind of burned in gold exploration stocks. If you owned them in the highs up into 2011, you rode them all the way down into 2015. If you bought back in 2016 or 17, you rode them all the way back down to kind of where we are presently. And so I think you need, kind of a different investor base to come in. I do think there is a lot of alpha in exploration stories, at the right time in the market, but they are not, generally long-term buy and holds. What's going to move them, I think, will be, sustained gold prices will help, performance in the seniors and the mid-tier companies. And then you'll start to see a little bit more money coming in, being spent on exploration in the junior end. And some of those companies will be successful. They'll make discoveries and they'll be 10, 20 baggers. And then when people start to see people making real money in juniors, then the floodgates will open and you'll have people buying, as they did back in 2007, 2008, people were falling over themselves to buy anything with gold in the name. Irrespective of the asset, irrespective of the location. And we may get to that again, but we're a long, long way away from that sentiment.
It certainly seems that way. I mean, I know of various gold juniors that I sat down and met with at Beaver Creek, and I'm talking companies that have had discoveries and they have cash on the balance sheet, and they've historically spent, over $10 million in drilling, and yet they're sitting at an enterprise value of like $5 or $6 million. Yeah. And you chat with them and they're just scratching their head going, well, nobody really seems to care. What's it going to take? And I agree. It feels like when retail investors see success happen and they see those names that go from, 20 cents to $6. And we have had a couple of them like Snowline Gold and Great Bear and Philo. It helps, but I think also the companies that do have this success, it'd sure be swell if they could make sure that they're making enough noise that the entire retail investor community sees what's happening, because that way it's more likely that people are going to catch that FOMO and go, I want to find the next Great Bear. For example, if you go on Great Bear's YouTube page and you look at the videos that they put up when they were hitting those huge discoveries back in 2020, they all got like 100 views. And it just felt like they didn't do a good enough job of marketing the company. Do you think that in general the community of gold CEOs need to do a better job of storytelling and and getting the word out there, or do you think that this is just a function of capital flows?
I think people have different approaches. There are obviously companies and CEOs, management teams in general that focus heavily on the retail space. And I'll give you an anecdote. So, I worked for Rob McEwen at Gold Corp back in 2005. And at that time, he merged Gold Corp and Wheaton River, and they moved the head office to Vancouver. And so I was out of the job, but I stayed with Rob. And one of the first thing he did was to buy an investment in a company called US Gold. And US Gold was a OTC company in the States. It had a project in Nevada, exploration, and the management wanted to leave. Rob bought a third of the company, and he paid 36 cents for his stock. And the stock ran over a period of about 7 months to almost $10 a share. And that was purely based on the people that had made a lot of money on Gold Corp. It was a good time in the market. People were looking for stories. And that retail following and institutional following, for that matter, that Rob had at Gold Corp followed him into the next company, which was US Gold. And it ran way too far, way too fast. And we were able to raise money, at good prices at 450 and beyond. But ultimately, it all backtracked because it had moved, well past to, where it should have done at the beginning. We had no control over that at the time. We were glad to see it, but it is possible to have even too great a following, if you know what I mean, into a name, right? Even though you try and temper the enthusiasm and you say, look, this is just exploration. It's early stage. We don't know what's going to happen. People have sometimes a very high conviction. So this is not a market where we're seeing that. I mean, Rob is making investments on an almost weekly basis, and those companies are not moving based on his investment. And yet he sees a lot of value in this market.
So it's the first time we've had you on. You have a company called Inventus. What's the high level overview for Inventus?
So Inventus is a traditional exploration company. We put our money where our mouth is. It's funded largely by high net worth individuals. Rob McEwen, Eric Sprott. There's a handful of others that you would recognize in there. And the idea is to make a discovery. We have two projects. One of them, kind of, is already a discovery. It was made a number of years ago that we've been developing. That's Pardo. And then Sudbury 2 was one that we kind of conceived of and picked up in 2017, grassroots exploration. And that's the Sudbury 2 asset. So we have two assets. We're focused in the prolific camp of Sudbury, Ontario. All our projects are within 60 or 70 kilometers of Sudbury. But it's a very small company, and like so many, we've struggled in recent years to raise capital and get awareness around what we're doing. But we believe in exploration, and it's cyclical. These things will come back into favor, and we'll be there.
How much historic drilling's been done on each of the properties?
So at Pardo, there's been quite a large number of holes, but they're very shallow. And so maybe I should just talk a little bit about the geology a little bit, just in
Sure.
lay terms to kind of orient you. So Pardo is a paleoplacer. What paleoplacer means is basically an ancient placer. So this is not like the Alaskan gold rush TV shows where they're mining placers. This is that happened a couple of billion years ago, and then it gets compressed and lithified into a layer and becomes a paleoplacer. It's not dissimilar from the Witwatersrand mining area in South Africa, or in the Pilbara, where there were some paleoplacer discoveries, or in Ghana. The Tarkwa is a major mine that's a paleoplacer. And in Brazil, there's one, Jacobina, that's a major mine. All of these areas are pretty prolific, but they're very rare. There aren't a lot of paleoplacers being mined today. And in North America, there aren't any. So it's really kind of a foreign concept to a lot of the investors here. We found one, years ago, and have been developing it. We've put about 500 holes into it. As I said, they're shallow. So imagine a 2 meter thick layer of rock. It's a conglomerate rock that contains gold. In that conglomerate, you've got clast material, which is barren of gold, it's boulders and cobbles and stuff. It's got no gold in it. And then all the gold is in the matrix, the space in between. And so in the matrix, the grade varies a lot. Sometimes it's very high grade, multiple ounces per ton, and sometimes there's no grade. And our challenge has been through drilling and sampling to figure out where the gold is and what its concentration is.
Have there been any historic drills in the ground on the project?
Yeah, we've got almost 500 holes, I think, in total over the years. Now, a lot of that wasn't sampled properly because we were doing it before we understood really what was needed to sample a paleoplacer properly. But since I came on board, and I only got involved in the company in 2016. Since I came on board, we've been doing things quite differently, and the approach has been different, and we've been getting more consistent results.
I'm kind of blown away when, for example, I learned about an XRF gun,
Yep.
which is effectively a handheld assay lab where you can go around, scan a piece of rock, and it gives you some sort of sense of the mineralization in the rock. How has technology changed the way that you guys can explore this property today versus when those previous 500 holes were drilled?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. There have been a number of changes fairly recently that we are going to implement. We actually haven't implemented them yet, but for example, photon assay, which is something you may have heard of or maybe not. But there's a company out of Australia called Chrysos, and they make these machines that basically do a non-destructive assay for gold. And so you fill a little can with 500 grams of your sample and you put it in the machine and it tells you what the concentration of gold is. Um, that is a great technology for our application because what we need to do is to take larger samples to get more representative results. Because what happens at Pardo is that the gold is really fine. It's small particles, and they're not uniformly distributed in the matrix, right? And so if you think about collecting a sample, you need to collect a representative sample. Well, how do you do that? And in our deposit, the only way to do that is to collect a fairly large sample, right? Because you need to make sure that you get some gold grains in your sample. Otherwise, you're going to get, no result basically on your assay. So that's a technology that we think is going to, be a real big improvement, going forward, basically, when we do sampling and assay. As an example, I mean, I think that, at Pardo, there aren't any geophysical techniques, for example, that we figured out. We think Pardo is going to be relatively easy to develop. If there's a significant resource to find there, it'll be very shallow, be mined, open pit with maybe underground component as well. But it's a laterally extensive, so it goes, in every direction basically, and it's sort of a thin layer that you need to extract to mine it.
Now, you guys did was it a 5,000 ton bulk sample at the Pardo project?
We did, yeah, in 2022. So as we've been developing this, we've been doing drilling, and then we thought, well, if we could bulk sample it, that would give us another data point. Because as I said, the larger the sample that you collect, the more representative it will be for the grade. So we actually, in a few years before that, we did 1,000-ton bulk sample. And that one really outperformed. And when I say that, it got a much higher grade at the mill than it did in the drilling. And so we were like, okay, let's repeat that, but do 5,000 tons because that's an even more, meaningful number. And so we did that in 2022. And the results in that test was basically equivalent to the drilling that we had done before the sampling, which is not a bad result. I mean, that consistency is kind of what you want. You want to demonstrate that you can estimate the grade by drilling before mining.
Is there any reason to think that like, let's just say gold goes crazy and it goes to $3,200 an ounce, and suddenly you guys are able to raise money really easily, and it's game on. Is there any way that you guys could do like a small sort of bulk tonnage uh, production strategy at the property, or is that not the purpose
I mean, I
of what you
think
did?
you could. The struggle that we had when in 2022 and doing the bulk sample was really where do you send that material, right? You need a mill to send it to because we don't have a process plant on our property. So if gold goes that high, I can tell you every mill will be processing as much as they can, as fast as they can every single day. So there'll be no capacity at all in terms of custom milling. Um, so in that environment, I think the best thing to do would be to raise enough money to do a very substantial drill program and really lean into defining a resource, through drilling. And I think that's how you would get the maximum value at that time, not by actually producing the gold, but by defining a big deposit that, you could then develop or sell to a company that wants to develop.
Are there any royalties on the two projects?
There are, yeah. There's a 3% NSR on Pardo, of which we can buy back half or 1.5% for $1.5 million Canadian. And then on Sudbury 2, there are several royalties. There's a 2% NSR and a couple of leased packages of land. Those are the areas that have the most advanced exploration targets. And then there's a 0.5% royalty on the balance of the property.
What can you tell us about your cap table? What prices have you mostly raised money at? We know Rob McEwen's involved. Are there any other noteworthy investors that are worth mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, Rob and Eric Sprott were the two that came in quite early on in Inventus. They invested back in, I believe it was 2012 or 2013. Um, and they kind of in 2015 when resources were experiencing a really tough time, those two gentlemen kind of saved the company from delisting and kind of revived it. And that's when I got involved with the story. Um, I mean, we've raised money. I'd say most of the money we've raised has been, in the 10 to 15 cent range. We haven't raised a huge amount of money in the last number of years. I think around $6 million, something like that. We try and keep things very lean. Like, I don't take any salary currently. I'm doing it because I'm a shareholder, and because I represent, some of the larger shareholders. Um, so we have a very, very low burn rate relative to other companies. We don't spend a lot on marketing. We do, things like this, which are very, very cost effective to do. Um, and we just focus on putting everything that we can into the ground as efficiently as we can. Um,
So yesterday we interviewed the founder of Next Gen Energy, Lee Courier, and they made obviously a massive discovery, and today are on the precipice of being one of the largest mining companies in the world based on that one discovery. I thought something that he said that was really interesting that sort of made me fall out of my chair is that he'd rather drill a property that has had no drilling on it historically versus a property that has lots of drilling on it. What do you think of that?
I mean, I can kind of see where he's coming from. Sometimes you're misled a lot by projects that have previously been explored. You're either misled to like them or you're misled to not like them based on the previous results, which are sometimes not meaningful. And so going into a situation completely green is sometimes better, from a process standpoint, it's cleaner.
For the remainder of the year, what are we looking at here? Is there going to be any exploration going on over the property?
Yeah, so our plan this year is to focus on Pardo. We want to do a resource drilling, phase, and that would occur this summer, most likely. We're in discussions right now to figure out how that's going to come together. Sudbury 2, we focused on for the last couple of years. There's still great potential there, but I think it's more of a polymetallic flavor there. So we're looking for nickel, copper, cobalt, and gold. But we think in this market, the gold project is probably the key project to focus on. And so we may look for a partner to work on some of the Sudbury 2 area with us, or we may do nothing at all. We don't have to spend any money there. We own all these projects 100%.
Okay, well, Stefan, thanks very much for hopping on here. I think you got a very interesting project. It's one of those projects that I know that there's probably mornings where you're waking up and saying, yikes, why am I doing this? And then there's times where the capital starts to flow in and it's all worth it. And I feel like we're entering one of those points here where when gold starts to take off here, you're going to be very happy that you're taking the time to work for shareholders and not receive a salary. These last number of, I'm not sure how long that's been going on for, but when the capital starts flowing, it's only a matter of time until it trickles down to the juniors. At least that's what I keep telling myself as I keep investing in them. So thanks very much for hopping on here, and hopefully when you guys get some good results and make that major discovery, you'll hop back on here and tell us about the next big moves.
Very good. Yeah, it's a pleasure, Steve, and thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks, everyone.